So today we're working on lesson 11 and we need to write a sentence using each of these words. So the first word is wheedle and you'll find that on page 215. So right here in the middle it says Ben tries to wheedle it out of her, but when he sees it's no use, he goes outside to wait. And if we back up just a little bit, we see that Ben hands the receiver to his mom, who says hi to Mrs. Tibbets. He doesn't know what to make of it when, after a minute of listening, she starts laughing. "I see," she says, looking over at Ben. "All right." She hangs up and announces, "Mrs. Tibbets is picking you up in about 15 minutes. "For what?" "She'll tell you." "But, Mom!" "I'm sorry, you'll just have to wait." Ben tries to wheedle it out of her, but when he sees it's no use, he goes outside to wait. So from this, we have Ben's mom finding out something from Mrs. Tibbets over the phone, and then Ben wants to know really badly, but his mom is not going to tell him, and he tries really hard to get it out of her, but he just can't, so he goes outside to wait. So from there, I'm hoping you can get a pretty good idea of what wheedle means and be able to use it in a sentence. And then we have the word undergrowth on page 218. And this is when they've been talking. Let me just flip over to 217. And Mrs. Tibbet says, "Look, just look." She points to the path ahead. Ben looks where she's pointing and the hair rises on his arms. It's a rattlesnake crossing the path about 10 feet in front of them, sliding quietly over the dirt and leaves. Another one follows it. Ben and Mrs. Tibbets watch them until they disappear into the undergrowth. Okay, so we know that they have been walking in the land outside of where Mrs. Tibbets' house is, and they've come across some snakes on the path. And if you've ever been on a hike or on a walk and maybe you've seen a snake or a rabbit or something like that, and then they slither or run away and disappear into the bushes and all of that, that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so then now I'm going to move on to the writing prompt. And it says, "How has Ben changed during this story?" Reread the paragraph on page 217 that starts with, "Without a word, like they speak the same silent language." Use text evidence from the passage and earlier in the story to write an explanatory paragraph. All right, so right here in 5 to 7 sentence, you're going to write an explanatory paragraph. So you're going to be explaining how Ben has changed during the story. So if we go back to page 217, we have, "Without a word, like they speak the same silent language, Mrs. Tibbets and Ben walk around the garage and head toward the woods. Ben feels his feet connect with the ground like he's part of it and it's part of him. As they enter the trees, a breeze pushes the branches back and forth, showing the silvery undersides of the leaves. They come closer and closer to the place where the vernal pool was and will be again." So here we can see how close Ben and Miss Tibbets are because they walk without a word, without any sort of discussion at all. Like they speak the same language, they start to walk around towards the garage as if they're just thinking the same thing. But when I look back in the book almost to the beginning, and this is on page 9, we can remind ourselves about what we thought about Mrs. Tibbets, or what the kids were saying about Mrs. Tibbets at the very beginning. And here she is when she's very first come into class, and it says, "Mrs. Tibbets walks down the row of desks, then turns up the next aisle. When she gets to Ben's desk again, she leans over his paper. 'I finished,' Ben says. She reaches out with her wrinkled hand and jabs a short, cracked fingernail at a word on his paper. Mrs. Cutcher has fingernail polish on her fingernails, Ben thinks. Not Mrs. Tibbets. Ben looks at the word under her finger. He sees that he has accidentally left the T out of nocturnal. He already knows what the word means, something that comes out at night. he fixes the spelling. And then we have a little exchange with them on the next page after Ben has, remember Ben picked up a mouse out of the cage and Mrs. Tibbets came in, and so then we have an exchange about her asking him or telling him not to touch the mice again, and him trying to explain that he's taken care of mice before, but she's not very happy with the whole situation. So we have that interaction with them at the very beginning of the book, and then think about how their relationship develops all the way through the book until we have at the very end where it says, without a word, like they speak the same silent language, they turn and start walking around the garage and out towards the back. So you'll complete that writing response with 5 to 7 sentences.